Yesterday we began a Tosfos Divra Maskil Dishtika Kododam. You're here on Daf Peches. But we didn't really finish it up, so I just want to finish that up as we start today's discussion. And Tosfos is trying to clarify the halacha called Shtika Kodah. How does it work? And he's going to introduce a concept called Raglayim L'Dova. So what happened is that one aide testifies against Ruvain, so to speak, that he ate chelev b'shogeg, he has to bring a korban chatos. And that aide, testifies against Ruvain. Ruvain says nothing. He's silent. And the Gemara applies a principle here called shtika kodah. The Tosfos says that what does shtika kodah mean in this context? Pirish, kevan d'shasak, since he's not making any protest against the aide to deny that he ate chelev, therefore, nira lo emes. It appears to us that it appears to him to be true. Do you follow? In other words, when we look as spectators and we see Ruvain the accused being silent, it looks to us as if Ruvain knows for sure that this is true. In other words, that's Ruvain, assumes that he must have eaten chelev, otherwise he would have been machlish. But it's not a hodas baldin kemeya edim dami shtika kodah. All it does is creates raglayim l'dova. Why raglayim l'dova? Because first of all, we have the testimony of the aide. Maybe that itself would not be sufficient, but add to that the silence of Ruvain, the accused. Well, let's put A plus B together, and that leads us to the conclusion, circumstantial evidence, that he indeed ate chelev and he's chayav to bring a korban chatos. Aval lekala meimar, don't interpret it as hodah mash, sheodea vaday shekenu. Don't think that the aid is just a kind of a conduit, a prop, so to speak. But it's really shtika kodah, and it means that Ruvain knows that he ate chelev. And the proof is because Kevin Shu shows it. No. That's not pshat. It's not purely based on shtika kodah, because the hodah of this shtika is only a raglayim l'dover. We need both the aid and the raglayim l'dover, and we have to add those two elements, those two variables together. And you could have said that the shtika itself is a hodah, and that hodah is not predicated on the aidus of the aid. It's just simply his hodah. And the shtika itself gives us the impression that he's certainly moda devadi ocha. No, that's not going to be the pshat. We only have not a hodah mamish, but a raglayim l'dover, which we're going to integrate together with the aidus of one aid, and it's A plus B equals C. Then we're going to believe that he's chayav chatos, he ate it b'shogeg. Diyam came. How does Tosfos know that it cannot be that shtika kodah means that it operates b'toras hodah, and it's a vada? Because if you would say such a thing, then you're up against the contradiction from a Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin, in Perek Omer. So I have the Gemara here on the table, but I'll just summarize. I was able to look up the Gemara. What I got from the Gemara in Kiddushin Daf Samach Vav, the Omar, there the Gemara quotes Shmuel. Now what happened was that one of the very important members of the group of Talmidim was a summa. He was a blind person. And Shmuel says to the blind person who was sitting in front of him, when an Eid Echad came in and testified, Ishtecha Zinsa, your wife had an extra relationship there, and therefore you have to give her a divorce, you're not allowed to live with her. Now Abai says that Shmuel responded in the following way: if you believe the Eid, the Lav Gazlanahu, you don't believe that he's a thief, he's not possibly Eidus, is then Shmuel instructs the Summa, Zil Afka, divorce your wife. Now, if we're going to assume that we're relying on Eid Echad based on Hodah, meaning that this is a full-fledged Hodah on the part of the Summa, and it has nothing to do with the Nemanus of the Eid. Just drop the Eid as if he didn't exist. I mean, the Eid was only there in order to prompt a Shtika Kodah dummy, but now we can operate totally independently with Shtika Kodah. Im Kain, if that be the case, then Afilu Ha'Eid Gazlan Namit, even if the Eid would have been a thief, we would still force the Summa to divorce his wife. Me'achashu Shosek, once Shtika Kodah dummy. It's no nafkamina whether the Eid is a Gazlan or not a Gazlan, because we're not relying on the Eid. We're relying on Shtika Kodah dummy. Now, from the fact that Shmuel made it conditional that this Eid was an Eid kosher, that proves that there's a tziruf here, there's an integration of the Eidus of the Eid Echad together with his Shtika. And we only rely on the Shtika because of the tziruf between the Shtika and the Eid Echad. In the Sugya of Eid Echad, who testifies that your wife had this extramarital relationship. And Rabbi Tam explains, Mikoach Ahida Gittin, from a Gemara in Gittin on Daf Nun Dalid, that implies there that Abai and Rav both hold that Ein Echad Neman, unless it's Biyadam. That's the only case that Ein Echad is Neman, when he himself could do what he's claiming he did, like a first Shumas amongst. So we see clearly that Taima, the Amarle Eid Echad Achalti Chelek, that we are relying to some extent on the Eid Echad, who says you ate Chelek, or Sharchan Nirva, or Nitmu Tarosecha, Ba'Allah Shosei. Now we're going to say that Nemona Eid, the Eid is believed. Again, even in all cases where it's not Biyado, nevertheless he's believed. Why is the Eid believed? We're holding now, like Rav and Abaye, that Eid Echad Nem B'Surin is only in the case of Biyado, and these cases are certainly not in the case of Biyado. For example, the Eid testifies about Reuven that he ate Chelek. I mean, that's not Biyado. He can't force Reuven to eat Chelek. So why are we relying on the Eid Echad? According to Abai and Rav, who say that Eid Echad is neman conditional on Biyado. There's no Biyado in these cases. And the answer is Mishum the Shtika Kodah Dam. In a Masechet Yevamot, like the Gemara says here. And Rabbeinu Tam is explaining that Shtika generates a Raglayim L'Dov. So, for example, if the Eid testifies that Sharcha Nirva Lifanecha, so that in the case of Shtika creates a Raglayim L'Dov, so that now we can rely on the Eid Echad, and that's all we need. So Sharcha Nirva Lifanecha means that if we combine both the testimony of the one Eid together with the Shtika Kodah, which generates a Raglayim L'Dov that he's Moder, then we will establish that the Shar is the Shar HaNirva. And you need Skila. And basically the same logic is going to apply according to Rabbeinu Tam in the case of Nitmu Taros Secha. That when the aide testifies in front of Ruvain that his Taros became Tmeim, and Ruvain says nothing, the silence of Ruvain creates a Reglaim L'Dova, that's indeed so. And we're going to integrate that Shtika Kodah as Reglaim L'Dova together with the Eid Echad, and that creates a full-fledged Reglaim L'Dova. And we assume the Taros are Tmeim. The Ode, and another proof that this Nemonis of the Eid Echad together with Shtika Kodah creates a Reglaim L'Dova, the He Odah Mamish. If you were to say that Shtika Kodah Mamish without Reglaim L'Dova, Lo Avishayich L'Meimar Hasam, Nemon Ha'ed. Why does Gemara use the terminology Nemon Ha'ed? So the Eid is not believed at all. It's Shtika Kodah. Okay. But he Samyanami, also that case of Kedushin of Lisuma, when they told him Ishtcha Zizka, it's not Hodog Mura of the Suma. I mean, he probably can't see, so how does he know? But it's rather Hechi Motzi Leda. How could he know about Ishinsa? El Vadai Lav Hodog Mamashi El Chagami Koch Reglaim Davar Avi Shtika Kodah. There are two types of Shtika Kodah. There's a full-fledged Shtika Kodah, and then there's a Reglaim Davar Shtika Kodah. Okay. Now, the Gemara here on Daf Pei Ches, if you recall, has a case of Barili, the Shuman, and Mehema. And Tosus now, Dibra Maskil Barili, wants to determine what is the source for Eid Echad Nema. And he says the following. How do we know that an aide who testifies Barili, I know for sure that this Chatif is Shuman, how do we know he's believed? Yesh Mefarsh the Gamrina Menida. She's believed to say to her husband that she already went through the process of purification of Tara. The Omar Ban Nadir, as the Gemara says in Ksubas Adaf Ayin Beis, Darshina Me'akosu, V'safarta Allah, and Uliatzma. She's believed to testify about herself that she's Tahora, because she counts the Zayin Akiyah and Liatzma. Liatzma means she's believed. Now we're going to derive from that Erech Nemin Lahai Chaticha Zu Shuman. So Tosvesvim Tomar, if we're going to derive it from Nida, that an Erech is Nemon to be Matir. Why does the Gemara vacillate and say, Minolan, how do you know the Erech is believed against a Cheskas Isur? Isn't that a case of an Isha who testifies Tahorani? And she's going up against the Cheskas Isur? And she's believed? So this is the Kasha Tosus. The Gemara leaves us hanging in midair about how do we know that Eid Echad is believed against the Chazak Yisura. But if the source for Eid Echad is the case of Nida, she has a Cheskas Yisur. Omeri, the Nida is considered Huchzak Yisura, the Nehidi Achshav Rasa, the Kol Lo is Chazak Yisura, Shetira Liola. So there's no Cheskas Isur in the case of Nida. And why is that? Because we're talking about Liolam. No, it's during the course of her entire life. She's not always going to be in a Cheskas Isur. Now she saw, so she's in a Cheskas Isur. But it's not called this Chazak Isura. She'll see for the rest of her life. Now, I'm a little bit confused about the following. Right now, she saw Dam Nida, so she has a Cheskas Isa. What good is it to say that down the line, she won't have the Cheskas Isa Li'olam? There's some reason, which I don't understand the logic of, but the Chazak only applies when we know that it's going to continue. And infinitum. See, I would have said that the reason why she's believed is because it's biyada. She can go into the mikveh. So she said she was mitara herself. She's believed because of biyada. But in that case, we don't have a source from Nida for the conclusion that Erechanem be surim. I mean, in case of Lois Chazak. Okay, now let's see if we can get a little bit of an insight into Yesh Me'ila Bekonomus. Because the Gemara says that according to one opinion, if you take a konam, you say like Hikar Zu Asar Alai Bekonam, then it has a quasi status of Hegdesh and there is Me'ila. If he would enjoy the benefit of this, I don't know, whatever it is, if he eats the loaf of bread. Now, if you take a look at the Gemara here on Peiches, Gemara says that Ika Sara Yesh Me'ila Bekonomos, which is about about 6 lines down the white lines. So Ika Sara Yesh Me'ila Bekonomos Uktushas Domim Nachtalahu Mishum Dibiyada Liftosa. You can't prove anything from Biyada. Let's see if we can figure out what bothers Tosus. And the Mesifta gives a little bit of an introduction, a short introduction. He says that there are 2 categories of Nidarim. There's a neder where the object becomes Hegdesh Lashamayim. There's a neder where the object becomes a konam. And in the case of a konam, that's called a din neder, an isa neder. It's not a din of Hegdesh. And it's a machlokes, if a person takes a neder with the language of konam, is it Hegdesh or is it a separate isa? And the nafkamina is going to be, if he ate it, does he bring a karba me'ila? Because it has the status of Hegdesh. Now let's keep in mind the second hakdama, second introduction. Hegdesh lends itself to pidyon, and through the pidyon it becomes chulin. Now, with regard to a konam, it could be that a konam also lends itself to pidyon. That's going to be one shita. Now, if you hold that yesh me'ilu b'konamos, then it has a din of hegdesh and it also has pidyon. But in contrast, if you hold ein me'ilu b'konamos, then there's no me'ilah and no pidyon in the case of konam. And the reason for that is because then you're holding that we classify konomos under the general rubric of a neder which is just a neder. It's not hegdish. Now the Gemara establishes that according to the Man Diomer Yesh Me'ilu B'Konomos, is pigeon like hegdish, and according to Man Diomer Ein Me'ilu B'Konomos, there's no pigeon. Hiksha Rabbeinu Yitzchak ben Rabbeinu Meir is the Rivam. The Vishvuos Perak Gimel Sondaf Chav Beis Mashma Dafilu Man Diomer Yesh Me'ilu B'Konomos Ein Lahem pigeon. Even if I would upgrade the status of a konam to that of a quasi-hegdesh status, such that you violate me'il if you eat the konam, but nevertheless there's no pigeon. And has Rivam no such a thing? The Sanya Hassam, the Gemara quotes a Brisa, Ha'omer kikar zu hegdesh v'achla, bein hu bein chavero. So once you declare that this kikar is hegdesh, then no one's allowed to eat it, and anyone who eats it is ma. Again, he declares kikar zu hegdesh v'achla bein hu bein chavero ma. Lefichach yesh la pigeon. But he says kikar zu alai hegdish. So he added the word alai, and that means he only asked it on himself as a konam. So it means alai ke hegdish. Then who, if he eats it, ma chavero lomo, because he did not answer it onto his friend. He didn't say kikar zu hegdish. He said kikar zu alai hegdish. Bichach, since vis-a-vis his friend, there's no Megillah. Right? Because if it's kehegdish, then his chaver would also be chayav for Me'ilah. And if we're saying that humal v'chaver lomal, then obviously it's not kehegdish, and therefore ein lo pigeon. And the Gemara quotes a Brisa in the name of Rabbi Meir that there's no pigeon. And then Chachamim omrim, the dissenting view of the Chachamim, yafilu anoder atzmo she'achal lo mo'ah, because the Chachamim hold ein me'ilu b'konomos. Mashma, the Dafka Bereisha, that was the case where he said kikar zu hegdesh. The Havi hegdesh, Havi hegdesh gomer. So if he says kikar zu hegdesh, that's hegdesh gomer. It's not a konam, it's hegdesh. And then we'll say yesh lo pigeon. But in the Sefer, the Komar Olai, which is a konam, is even though Afal Pi Shalashitas Rabbi Meir Baal the Yesh Milu B'Konomos become Ein Lo Pigeon. That's the Shita of Rabbi Meir. There's no pigeon. So we're holding on the one hand Yesh Milu B'Konomos, but there's no pigeon. The Kosher. And now we don't understand our sugi, because our sugi says that if you hold yesh me'ilu b'konomos, then there is pigeon. That's the kasha of Tos. Now let's just for one moment, let's just go back to the Gemara here on Daf Pei Ches Amud Beis. And yesterday we learned Rabbi Zera. So let's go over Rabbi Zera. Omer Rabbi Zera. The reason why we make it and we rely on one aid to be mater nashis ishis mitoch chomer shechmarto lebesofa, because if she gets married based on this one aid and her husband will show up, she'll have all the chumras of the Mishnah. Is therefore ikalta olea betchila. We were mater lechatchila that she could get married based on the testimony of one single aid. And the reason for this, because she's very afraid that maybe her husband will turn out to be alive, and then she'll get stuck with all the penalties and the chumros. So the Gemara asks, Lo lichmar v'lo leikim. Why do you start with all these chumras and allow her the leniency of getting married? And the Gemara answers, Mishum iguna ikilu be'rabbanan. We don't want her to sit as an aguna for the rest of her life, not knowing if her husband's alive or dead. So we rely on one aid together with her research and her investigation. And the Chachamim saw fit to be makil on her and to be mater to get married based on the testimony of one witness. Now, I have here in the back Yalkut HaBi'urim. And I just want to read to you one little paragraph here. Then maybe we'll get a chance to photocopy this and do it more be'iyun. He says, Harishonin bi'aru maskana sagamora ha'ima ne'emona shel aid the aid is isha hi doraisa odrabbanon the im hi ne'emonas dorabanon heich okru chachamim din Torah ve'minu li'edech. So he starts with the sheet of Tosfos that the ne'emonas is dorabanon v'yesh kach b'yad chachamim lakar dover min haTorah. Wow. Then he has the sheet of Rashi. And this Rashi appears in the Masechet Shabbos Kuf Mem Hey Beis. It's also the sheet of the Rashba in Chuvas, and the sheet of Mekubetz in Ksubas on Daf Gimel. And the only Rishon that apparently brings us down here in our sugya is the Meiri. Shenemonis Hider Abonon, V'chachamim Ifkiu Es Kedushi Arishon. It's as if she was never married to the first guy because of the principle of Afkinu Rabbana L'Kedushim. And finally, we have the Ritva. The Ritva says, Kimlu L'Rabbanon, the Milsa Di'avida L'Gluye, Shechmarta Ole B'Sofo, Vale Kushta Komisai. V'chidaiko Mitzvah, B'din Mitzvah, V'anan Sahadi B'Milsa. So the Torah is recognizing this ne'emanos of the Erecha D'Oraisa because it's a milsa davida l'gluya and because the Isha's daiko mitzvah. If I understand this correctly, the Ritva is really going out on a limb over here. He's saying that the Torah wants to aid him to prove something, but if we have other methods of proving it, then we can rely on those methods. And here we have the fact that the Eid Echad testifies, and it's a milsa davida l'gluya. Plus, add to that, Isha Daika Umitzvah. And when you put that all together, I think in one cholent, you come to the conclusion that we have enough evidence here to rely as if there were two Eidim. Oh, okay. So let's see where we got up to here. Oh, he has here a Chazon Ish. Leave it for tomorrow. And in the Gemara, we got up to Rabbi Zera. That's where we'll pick it up. Okay, then. So that's what we're gonna wish you a good day, and we'll continue.